Welcome to the 700 Club. Well, we're supporting the Taliban with our tax dollars. The United States has given Pakistan billions of dollars in military and financial aid to help fight Islamic terrorism. And despite all that, Pakistan was the major player in helping the Taliban retake Afghanistan.
Pakistan's interior minister even boasted that they are the, quote, custodians of the Taliban. George Thomas explains how the Pakistani government has provided aid and comfort to these Islamic radicals.
Within hours of the Taliban's takeover last month, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan praised the Islamic fighters for breaking what he called shackles of slavery.
When you become a mental slave, then remember that mental slavery is worse than actual slavery. It's more difficult to break the chains of mental slavery. In Afghanistan, they have just broken the chains of slavery.
Pakistan's involvement in Afghanistan goes back some 7 decades, and their support for the Taliban has been crucial since their founding in the 1990s.
From the very beginning, its inception, they helped in actually branding the name Taliban.
Pakistan's intelligence service, the ISI, along with its military, helped fund, train, and recruit Taliban fighters.
The Taliban would be a shell of itself. Its insurgency would be wildly ineffective without Pakistani state support.
Bill Raggio, editor of the Long War Journal, tells CBN News Pakistan's military played a crucial role in the early days of the offensive, allowing a surge of new fighters to cross the border and help the Taliban quickly overrun the country.
There's credible reports of Pakistani military units donning Taliban uniform and helping to serve as advisors and fight alongside the Taliban in Afghanistan.
Hussein Haqqani, who served as Pakistan's ambassador to the United States, says the Taliban's re-emergence is a significant win for Islamabad, even though the Muslim-majority nation was ostensibly America's ally in the war against al-Qaeda and the Taliban.
Most of the Taliban leaders have lived in Pakistan all this time. Their families are in Pakistan. There is an ethnic overlap with Pakistan. And so Pakistan now has major say in Taliban's international affairs. And that makes Pakistan the winner.
Pakistan's interior minister boasting that they are the custodians of the Taliban, saying, quote, "We have taken care of them. They got shelter, education, and a home in Pakistan. We have done everything for them." That confession coming as some are now questioning Washington's endless appetite for Islamabad's con games.
Pakistan has always been the main problem. The U.S. and the West inability to coerce Pakistan to end its support for the Taliban is the primary reason why Afghanistan is falling to the Taliban today.
Lawmakers across party lines are demanding more severe consequences for Pakistan's subversive role, especially after getting billions in military and financial aid from American taxpayers while supporting the Taliban's terrorist activities. Secretary of State Antony Blinken questioned on the matter during hearings on Afghanistan.
Pakistan is currently a major non-NATO ally of the United States, giving it a number of benefits, including privileged access to U.S. arms sales. Is it time for the United States to reassess its relationship with Pakistan and reassess its status as a major non-NATO ally?
This is one of the things that we're going to be looking at in the days and weeks ahead, the role that Pakistan has played over the last 20 years, but also the role that we would want to see it play in the coming years.
Meanwhile, 55% of Pakistanis in a poll this week said they're happy that the Taliban seized Afghanistan. George Thomas, CBN News.
Well, this is one where you have to look at a little bit of history. So let's go back 70 years to a prime minister of India, Nehru, and he made a decision that India would be non-aligned in the struggle between the USSR and the United States. And then he asked Moscow to come and give them aid. You can literally go to Bombay and look at all of the Russian architecture that is in that city, particularly around the airport. Literally, Russia helped India build back in the 1950s. In response, the U.S. became an ally of Pakistan, and it was all to align ourselves against the USSR. That got into full bloom in the 1980s when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. And so the support of Pakistan, military support of Pakistan, went into high gear in order to throw the Russians out of Afghanistan. Well, now it's our turn to recognize what's really happening there. And India, as the largest democracy in the world, is on an ideological basis closer to us than Pakistan. They are militant in their Islam, and they have been for a very long time. This isn't new for them. And you look at the ongoing conflict between Pakistan and India over Kashmir, the number of terrorist incidents, the famous one in Mumbai, at the hotel there, just horrible things have happened in the name of Islam. Now, here's the kicker, if you will. 20 years ago, the war in Afghanistan was launched because of the 9/11 attacks and an attempt to root out al-Qaeda from Afghanistan. Afghanistan had given them shelter, had given them an airfield in order to train on airplanes, and had provided support for Osama bin Laden. Well, when we invaded, where did Osama bin Laden go? Well, he went to Pakistan. They provided a compound for him, and they somehow want us to believe they didn't know it. They didn't know they were giving shelter to the biggest terrorist of our time. I don't believe that. They're now saying they gave shelter to the Taliban, to their families. They provided places for them to live, food for them to eat, education for their children. Well, they did the same thing for Osama bin Laden. Let us wake up to what they have done and done for years, and tried to hide their ideology, pretend that they're our friend in order to get our money and in order to get our weapons. And what are they doing with that? Well, they're using it against us. It is high time for this to stop. In other news, the U.S. Capitol is now on high alert ahead of a protest rally set to take place tomorrow. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. It is called the Justice for J6 rally, aimed at supporting people jailed for their criminal involvement in the Capitol riot on January 6th. The organizer is pledging the crowd will be peaceful, but as national security correspondent Caitlin Burke reports, law enforcement isn't taking any chances.
As you can see behind me, the fencing is once again back up around the Capitol. The crowd expected is likely to be much smaller than the thousands that gathered on January 6th. Still, it's the first large-scale security test since that fateful day.
Saturday's rally will take place in the exact same area where protesters turned violent on January 6th. It's also happening at a time when the intelligence community has been warning about domestic extremism.
The greatest terrorism-related threat to the homeland is the threat of domestic terrorism. Individuals who are prone to violence by reason of an ideology of hate or false narratives that we see spread on social media or other online platforms.
With an uptick in online chatter ahead of the Justice for J6 rally, the biggest concern is that extremists have taken notice. Organizer Matt Brainerd says he's confident that won't be the case.
This is a completely peaceful protest. It's an exercise of our First Amendment rights. Anybody advocating or intent on engaging in violence is not welcome.
Brainerd tells CBN News this rally is to demand justice for those individuals charged and imprisoned after January 6th, not accused of violence or damage of property.
We're standing up for the hundreds of individuals who've been charged, who've been hunted down, who've been turned into domestic terrorists by our media and our Department of Justice, who engaged in no violence. We're simply in the wrong place at the wrong time and historically have been treated with nothing more than a slap on the wrist.
In a statement, the U.S. Capitol Police say they will defend the First Amendment right to peacefully protest, but measures are in place to defend the Capitol.
Washington, D.C. police are on standby and will have an increased presence around the city. A request for support from the National Guard has also been made to the Pentagon. Something that's also worth mentioning, there will be no Republican lawmakers in attendance at this rally. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Thank you, Caitlin. Well, new inflation numbers show Americans are experiencing sticker shock. Meat, fish, poultry, and eggs are up almost 15% since the beginning of the pandemic. There's also a packaging problem, aluminum hitting its highest price in 10 years, and cardboard reaching an all-time high in February. Many analysts blame shortages and supply chain bottlenecks for the higher prices, and some experts point to government spending.
The federal government in the last 2 years, 20 and 21, has spent more than $6 trillion more than they've taken in tax revenue. That's all pure excess demand.
Inflation is one of the reasons West Virginia Democrat Joe Manchin has said he won't support President Biden's massive $3.5 trillion spending bill. The president failed to get Senator Manchin to support his proposal in an Oval Office meeting earlier this week, according to Axios. Manchin also voiced his concerns about the growing national debt. Democrats are deeply divided over the spending plan, with progressives supporting it and moderates worried about its high price tag and tax increases. Republicans opposed the president's plan, with Mitch McConnell calling it a reckless tax and spending spree. Well, turning now to the Middle East. This week marked the one-year anniversary of the signing of a peace deal much of the world never saw coming, the Abraham Accords. At first, they involved Israel and the United Arab Emirates, but they soon opened other doors as well. CBN's Chris Mitchell looks at the significance of this historic creation and what lies ahead.
Although initiated under President Trump, this week, a statement from State Department spokesman Ned Price indicates continuing support of the Abraham Accords.
We strongly support these agreements, and we look forward to advancing other opportunities to expand cooperation between Israel and countries around the world.
Today, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is planning a virtual meeting with representatives of the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Israel. Given the recent leadership changes in the U.S. and Israel, some fear the accords might not last. Former advisor to U.S. Ambassador David Friedman, Aryeh Lightstone, served as one of the architects of the Abraham Accords.
The Abraham Accords and peace in general is not a Republican thing. It's not a Democrat thing. It's an American thing.
When Israel and the UAE normalized relations, it became the first peace agreement between the Jewish state and an Arab state in 26 years. Within 4 months, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco also signed on to the Abraham Accords.
It is very rare that there's an opportunity for a win-win that can be transformational, not just for a country, but for a region. And the Abraham Accords is that transformational moment in history.
What makes these agreements different is the focus on including business, tourism, education, and research between the countries. That's helped open the doors to nearly $2 billion worth of business deals.
This has been a very unique opportunity between UAE and Israel to come with an agreement of peace and tolerance together.
What this has done is realign the Middle East between countries that want peace and prosperity and countries that want to continue to battle age-old conflicts.
Jerusalem Deputy Mayor Flor Hassan Nahum and Abdullah Bakr work together on the UAE-Israel Business Council.
The Abrahamic Accords, it's not about the Jews and the Muslims. It's also about other nationalities, other religions that they're involved into this, because we all live together.
Lightstone says the U.S. brought allies together, erasing unnatural divides and trying to remove the hurts.
There was an artificial line dividing Israel and other nations in the region and beyond. It just didn't make sense. When they can work together, it's going to drive more opportunity for more people in the region.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thank you, Chris. Gordon, the signing of these accords still seen today as a game changer.
Oh, it is an absolute game changer, and kudos to the Trump administration for changing that game, to being able to come into peace between the United Arab Emirates and Israel and kick off a wave of peace where we're actually thinking now Saudi Arabia may come to peace with Israel. In years past, that was always unthinkable. John Kerry, the Secretary of State under Obama, famously said, we're not going to pursue separate peace deals. We have to first solve the Palestinian conflict before we can get into peace deals, and we can't do that piecemeal. It has to all be, it's all or nothing. But Trump came in and had a different idea, and I'm very pleased to see that the Biden administration is saying, yes, let's pursue this. The name is significant. The name is the Abraham Accords, and it goes along with the biblical teaching of what happened when Ishmael and Isaac got together to bury their father. They made peace and did that together. Here are two brothers who were separated. Ishmael is biblical tradition that the Arabs come from Ishmael. Biblical tradition is the Jewish people come from Isaac. So you have these incredible traditions coming together in the Abraham Accords to literally bring brothers together and forge peace. Now, wouldn't it be wonderful if Israel were able to have peace with all its neighbors?